Welcome to the Slow Way podcast, a space where we explore slowing down, finding presence, and living intentionally. I'm Shruti, a holistic life coach and a yoga instructor, and my purpose is to help you clear out blocks that are keeping you from showing up as your best possible self. Together, we will learn to hold space for each other as we navigate through life and explore the depths of what it means to be human. Hello, everybody. Today's episode I am creating mostly for myself as a tool, a way to remind myself of the perspectives that have helped me in the past to manage emotional reactivity, especially around my loved ones. And it is sometimes hard for me to stay regulated when I'm faced with, situations where I am triggered by something a loved one has said. And so in a way, yes, I think recording this episode is like keeping a personal diary of insights that I can revisit whenever I need to remind myself to be less reactive and more responsive. So yes, let's get into it. I've noticed this when I'm working with others, especially in a professional setting, or rather a more detached setting. Applying all my tools of emotional regulations, it's so easy and it just feels relatively straightforward because there's often a sense of objectivity and space that allows me to separate my feelings from the other person's. However, with people I love, the stakes feel much higher. And with them, my past experiences, attachment patterns, expectations, all of this is so interwoven. And that sort of makes me feel more vulnerable and, just more reactive sometimes to emotional triggers. And I feel like this is largely the case with most of us. And the whole process of being more responsive rather than reactive with loved ones requires a blend of insight, practice, and a whole lot of compassion, both for ourselves and the people we care about the most. So why is it that we react more with our loved ones, right? Because when in close relationships, especially with family and partners, our very early attachment styles, which is rooted in our childhood experiences, those get activated. And these patterns at the time were formed to protect us, but they can also make us overly sensitive to certain interactions in real time. And that often resurfaces as unintentional reactions. And I try to keep that sense of awareness for myself, and if I am met with an emotional reaction from a loved one. So having that awareness is super important and very helpful. Another reason with those we love, we often feel so safe to be our truest selves. And ironically, this sense of safety can open the door to our unfiltered emotions, right? Because our truest selves is not always pretty. So, and that response and that reactiveness can include unprocessed wounds and expectations. So in that knee-jerk reaction, all of that sometimes just surfaces in a not so pretty way. And we also naturally expect our loved ones to, quote unquote, get us. Like, oh, you love me, so of course you get me. And which really isn't always the case. There are days when no, they don't get you. And that can lead to frustration when they don't respond to the narrative of response that you have in your head. And when those two, that projection that you have, and they don't meet that projection, now that leads to disappointment. And this perceived mismatch between what we hope for and what we receive, that often fuels reactivity. So now, what are the ways to shift this reactiveness to responsiveness? Number one is always self-awareness. And I think I sound like a broken record at this point. But I think just by starting to observe your reactions, notice the physical sensations and thoughts and emotions that arise in certain circumstances, and just bringing awareness to these moments helps you recognize when your guard is up, when your emotional armor is up. And that is when you need to train to tell yourself to pause before reacting. I think the best way to handle a situation like that, to not say anything at all, like Thumper's father said. Mostly all these reactions are a result of unhealed wounds, and exploring these through journaling, through therapy, or self-reflection, you will be able to pinpoint the root of these triggers. And largely it does run down to the childhood experiences that you've had. And did you feel unseen? Did you feel unheard? And then now as an adult, when there's a moment that comes up that sort of mirrors those early experiences, the child in you wants to throw a fit. And that's exactly what happens when you're reactive in that moment. But now you are not that 8-year-old anymore, and you have the choice to communicate calmly, and you have the choice to shift your perspective and see the whole situation from the other person's point of view, or even as a third person. And what that does is now you're attempting to acknowledge their feelings and their needs. And this practice creates an emotional distance and enables you to see them as another human being, and not as this perfect narrative of a loved one who gets you all the time, or who can never say anything that would ever hurt you. Now, instead, you're able to see this person as a being who has their own set of their own complexities and their own emotional challenges and baggages. So now, with this newfound compassionate lens that you're seeing this other person through, you can also set compassionate boundaries and protect both you and the relationship. You can be clear on what you need and gently communicate that. And that prevents you from bottling up your emotions. By no means am I saying do not communicate what you need to, but there is a more graceful and more gentler way to communicate. Because if you bottle up your emotions, that leads to even worse explosions later on. So just communicating with more gentleness is huge. And I'm sure you've heard of this before, using I statements, right? Where you start a statement with what you feel instead of placing blame and you did this or you did that. And it can go like, I feel this way when you do A, B, and C. Or instead of saying, oh, you always ignore me, it can sound like, I feel unseen and that hurts me. So making it about how you are feeling instead of accusing this other person of what they did or what they did not do, that is a huge game changer. And I'm telling you, it's harder said than done. It's much more difficult. It's very easy to say these things when you're having a very clear sky day in your head. But the more you practice these things, it just becomes second nature very quickly. And that's just how you then, in that case, you're just like rewiring now. You're rewiring your brain. And and just coming up with new set of skills of how to handle a communication failure, or how to handle rejection, or how to handle healthy feedback. Now, say all of that failed, right? And it could in a moment. And reactivity can be frustrating. But also remember the humanness of it all, right? It's normal. It's okay. It's okay to be reactive sometimes. And just learn to practice self-compassion quickly. And in that moment, the minute you know, you have fallen into the old pattern, and you did react, just hold space for yourself and your emotions with kindness. Because if you don't do that, you will very quickly fall into the cycle of guilt and shame around your responses. And that makes it more difficult to return to a place of calm. So if you feel you have fallen into that reactive pattern again, it's okay. It's okay. It's just a part of the whole human experience. And once you have come back to that space of calm, just know that it's never too late to apologize. Apologize for any harsh words that were said, and explain your feelings. The quicker you repair, it just shows that you're committed to growing together. I think I heard Teal Swan say this: the shorter the timeline between rupture and repair, the better. Because your closest relationships are potent ground for both your personal growth and your mutual evolution. And the intensity of these bonds, they mean that they hold a unique power. So they can either support you in growing and evolving together, or if you don't approach it with gentleness, it can actually bring out the worst in each other. So when you consciously engage in this work, relationships become beautiful spaces where you can shed all the old patterns and heal and offer each other the gift of growth. And I think that's a love language. That is definitely my love language. And I think it is so magical that you just grow together. But this requires commitment and self-awareness and the willingness to face these challenges together, and working on transforming reactivity into responsiveness. And this conscious approach not only strengthens the bond, but also paves the way for a relationship that nurtures both of you to your truest potential individually as well. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say today. I think I'm just recording this from what I'm learning and practicing in real time. And I'm just learning to hold space, just learning to calm those knee-jerk reactions, and just constantly recentering myself so that I can approach my loved ones with more openness and understanding. I think I'm going to wrap up this episode. Thank you so much for listening and holding space alongside me. I hope that in some way my personal reminders and reflections do resonate with you too. Your presence means so much. Until next time, take care and keep showing up with compassion for yourself and for those who you love. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.